When we think of the biggest health risks today, smoking is often at the top of the list. It's a well-known killer, linked to lung cancer, heart disease, and a host of chronic illnesses. But what if I told you there's something else? Something silent, hidden beneath the surface, that could be just as dangerous, if not more? Meet visceral fat, the deep abdominal fat that surrounds your internal organs. Unlike subcutaneous fat, the fat under your skin that you can pinch, visceral fat lies deep inside your belly, wrapping around your liver, pancreas, and intestines. You might be thinking, okay, fat is just fat, right? But here's the catch. Visceral fat is not just a passive storage depot for extra calories. It's biologically active, pumping out toxic substances that can wreak havoc on your body. Some researchers even call it an endocrine organ because it behaves like a gland, releasing hormones and inflammatory chemicals that can lead to serious diseases. Unlike fat stored in other areas of the body, visceral fat produces inflammatory compounds called cytokines, as well as excessive amounts of free fatty acids. According to Dr. Stephen Smith from the Pennington Biomedical Research Center, visceral fat is not just a passive energy reserve, it's an active player in metabolic health. So what does this mean for your health? Let's break it down. One of the biggest dangers of visceral fat is its impact on your heart. Studies show that even in people with a normal body weight, having excess visceral fat dramatically increases the risk of cardiovascular disease. The reason? It releases harmful chemicals that contribute to chronic inflammation and disrupt blood vessel function. A study published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology found that visceral fat is a strong predictor of cardiovascular disease, independent of BMI. That means even if you're not technically overweight, carrying visceral fat can still put you at risk for heart attacks and strokes. If you've ever heard of insulin resistance, you probably know it's one of the main drivers of type 2 diabetes. And visceral fat plays a huge role in this. The chemicals released by visceral fat interfere with your body's ability to regulate blood sugar levels, making it harder for insulin to do its job. The result? Blood sugar levels rise, the pancreas works overtime to compensate, and eventually, the system breaks down, leading to type 2 diabetes. Research indicates that reducing visceral fat through lifestyle changes can significantly improve insulin sensitivity and lower diabetes risk. Now, here's something that's rarely talked about visceral fat and cancer. Researchers have discovered that people with excess visceral fat have a much higher risk of developing certain types of cancer, including colorectal, breast, and pancreatic cancer. A study from Korea found that postmenopausal women with high levels of visceral fat had nearly double the risk of developing colorectal cancer. The link? Chronic inflammation. The constant state of inflammation caused by visceral fat creates an environment where cancer cells thrive. Here's something terrifying. Visceral fat has even been linked to brain diseases like Alzheimer's. Scientists believe that the inflammatory substances released by visceral fat can cross the blood-brain barrier, leading to damage in brain cells over time. A study published in Neurology found that people with higher levels of visceral fat had smaller brain volumes and a higher risk of cognitive decline. In simple terms, that stubborn belly fat could be contributing to memory loss and even dementia. Now let's tackle the big question. Could visceral fat actually be more dangerous than smoking? On one side, we have smoking, the infamous villain we all know about. It's directly linked to lung cancer, heart disease, stroke, and a long list of life-threatening conditions. The CDC reports that smoking is responsible for nearly 500,000 deaths per year in the US alone. But what if I told you that visceral fat, the deep belly fat you can't see, may be just as deadly, if not worse, for some people? Here's something surprising. Smoking and visceral fat are not entirely separate issues. In fact, smoking has been shown to increase visceral fat. According to a study published in Addiction, Both starting smoking and lifetime smoking contribute to increased visceral fat accumulation. That means while smoking might make you appear thinner, it's actually pushing more fat into the worst place possible, deep inside your abdomen, around your organs. This is because nicotine alters how fat is distributed in the body. It suppresses appetite and speeds up metabolism slightly, leading to lower overall body weight in smokers compared to non-smokers. But, and this is a big but, studies show that smokers tend to store more fat in their abdomen, particularly visceral fat, compared to non-smokers of the same BMI. There's also something called the smoking paradox. Many people gain weight after quitting smoking, and some of that weight gain includes an increase in visceral fat. This happens because nicotine suppresses appetite and increases metabolism slightly, so when someone quits, their metabolism slows down and they tend to eat more. However, here's the key takeaway. While quitting smoking might lead to temporary weight gain, it still drastically improves overall health. The cardiovascular and cancer risks from smoking far outweigh the temporary increase in weight. Plus, with the right diet and exercise, former smokers can manage visceral fat effectively. So, back to our question, which is worse? The answer depends on the individual. If you're a heavy smoker, the risks of lung cancer and heart disease are enormous. But if you have significant visceral fat, you're at an equally high risk for heart disease, diabetes, stroke, and even dementia. The real danger is when the two overlap. A smoker who also has high visceral fat is at a much higher risk than either one alone. This combination accelerates inflammation, increases insulin resistance, and leads to serious metabolic complications. But here's the good news. Both smoking and visceral fat can be controlled. Quitting smoking dramatically improves lung and heart health, while reducing visceral fat through diet and exercise significantly lowers the risk of metabolic disease. The bottom line? Both smoking and visceral fat are silent killers. The key is awareness and action. If you smoke, quitting is one of the best things you can do for your health. And if you have excess visceral fat, focusing on a clean diet, regular exercise, and stress management can literally add years to your life. The good news is, visceral fat is highly responsive to lifestyle changes. Here's how you can reduce it. Focus on whole, nutrient-dense foods like lean proteins, vegetables, and healthy fats. Avoid ultra-processed foods, refined sugars, and trans fats, which all contribute to visceral fat storage. Studies show that following a Mediterranean-style diet can significantly reduce visceral fat. Exercise is one of the most effective ways to burn visceral fat. High-intensity interval training has been shown to be particularly effective. Even just 30 minutes of brisk walking daily can make a difference. High stress levels lead to increased cortisol production, which encourages visceral fat accumulation. Practicing mindfulness, yoga, or deep breathing exercises can help lower cortisol and reduce visceral fat. Poor sleep is linked to higher visceral fat levels. Aim for at least 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep per night to keep your metabolism running optimally. Visceral fat is a silent but deadly force that can impact your heart, brain, and overall health. But the power is in your hands. By making simple lifestyle changes, you can significantly reduce your risk and take back control of your well-being. Now that you know the truth about visceral fat, what's your next step? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more health and longevity tips.